Hey everybody, my name is Amanda, and I was a Trump hater in 2016, and I am now on the Trump train, if you will. I'm voting for Trump in 2020, and this is one of the reasons I am voting for him, okay? Because I actually think his tax policy makes sense, and what he did with the tax cut actually helped my family. And even though what Joe Biden is saying is that he will not raise taxes if you make less than $400,000 a year, it's bogus. And he absolutely will raise taxes on middle class or working class families, and have the receipts to prove it. Okay, so if you enjoyed having more money in your pocket and not more money being taken out of your pocket, yeah, don't vote for Biden. Okay, and certainly don't believe his nonsense of if you make less than $400,000 a year, we're not going to tax you more, because it's pure garbage. So so here we go. If you go on Joe Biden's website, okay, Joe Kamala, their website, they have all these wonderful policies. One of them is a tale of two tax policies. Okay, so it's all about his tax plan, and within it he says that Trump promised tax cuts that would create jobs and provide savings for working families. Then goes on to say that Trump did not deliver on this promise, that he rewards wealth over work and wealth over small business, and that middle class Americans were largely left out. And this is simply not true. So there are a bunch of stories that I will link to underneath this, and I will show you here. But the Trump tax cuts in 2017 genuinely made a difference in people's lives. It actually helped middle class and or working class families. It put more money in their pockets, but there was a giant media effort to make it appear like it didn't have an effect on normal families' lives, and instead that these tax cuts were only for the wealthy, right? Like Trump's tax plan only helps the wealthy. It doesn't help small business, etc. Which, if you just look at the Trump economy pre-COVID, it was the best economy in the world. I mean, literally best numbers of our lives. So it obviously had an impact on small business, working families, all of that good stuff. Anyway, if we just look at the stories themselves, right? So you have the New York Times story here, right? So this says, face it, you probably got a tax cut. And studies consistently find that 2017 law cut taxes for most Americans, but most of them don't buy it, right? So there's a good chance you don't believe that you actually got a tax cut. And then we scroll down to the actual data. Okay, I'm a nerd, right? So I love this data. So people who got a tax cut, 64.8% of Americans. People who believe they got a tax cut, only less than 40% believe that they actually got a tax cut. And if we scroll down, okay, to a large degree, the gap between perception and reality on tax cuts appears to flow from a sustained and misleading effort by liberal opponents of the law to brand it as a broad middle-class tax increase. Okay, so the reason people don't believe that they got a tax cut is because, according to the New York Times, right, the paper of record, it's from a sustained and misleading effort by liberal opponents to brand it as a middle-class tax increase, saying that only the wealthy got a tax cut, but, don't believe that you got a tax cut, you probably got a tax increase, which is just patently false. Right, so here's a story from Fortune. Okay, Trump gave most Americans a tax cut and they didn't notice. Okay, and if we scroll down, here we go. Republicans passed a sweeping tax cut for 2/3 of Americans, saying it would pay for itself and American public would thank them. Okay, however, right here, okay, right stinking here, the Democrats really outmaneuvered the Republicans by convincing the American people that the thrust of the tax reform package was to cut taxes for the wealthy. And we failed to fully explain the success to the voters. Okay, so they were able to convince the American people that only the wealthy were getting a tax cut and that regular people were getting a tax increase. But that's not true. And then my favorite is from the Washington Post, which actually did a fact check. So here we go with the Washington Post. Senate Democrats falsely claim GOP tax plan will raise taxes for most working class families. Okay, they actually did a fact check on it. And who's the wonderful first senator that they quote here? Our lovely lady running for vice president, so truthful, so honest with the American people she is. On average, middle-class families earning less than $86,000 would see a tax increase under the Republican tax reform plan, is what Senator Kamala Harris said about the Trump tax plans. Okay, let's scroll all the way down, the facts, they break it down, and then we get all the way to the Pinocchio test. 4 Pinocchios. Lies. Democrats have spread far and wide the false claim that families making less than $86,100 on average will face a hefty tax hike. Actually, it's the opposite. Most families would get a tax cut. It's just lies. So even the Washington Post did a fact check and said that false. Trump is not raising taxes on working families. Instead, he's giving you money back. But somehow we don't seem to know or talk about that. Trump tax cuts were specifically focused on families. It increased the standard deduction by almost double. The amount of money that won't be taxed is doubled, which obviously would help families, okay, like my family. We have 3 kids, and that's another thing. So he doubled the child tax credit. So instead of getting $1,000 per child as a tax credit, you get $2,000 per child as tax credit. So you're getting double your money for your child tax credit. That was under Trump. He did that for working families, right? Giving you more money back in your pocket. Oh, one other thing that the Trump tax cuts did was they increased not only the child tax credit from $1,000 to $2,000, they also added a $500 deduction for anyone who is a dependent who's not a child. So if you're caring for anyone, like an older parent or just anyone else who's a dependent but who isn't a child, you actually get a tax credit for that person. Okay, so again, helping regular working class families as opposed to, what was that number under Obama-Biden? That number was 0. Okay, so I think a lot of these policies actually do help working class families, and it would be detrimental to a lot of families to have these tax cuts repealed, which is exactly what they want to do on day one. Don't vote for these people. And then if you just look at what happened underneath Trump's tax cuts, right? So I'll put this up on the screen so you can actually see it, but this is from the Centier research, right? And you can see the median household income. And if you look under Bush, right, your median income, that like gray dotted line here, it like slightly increases from like maybe 61 to 62,000 as your median. Under Obama, it goes from about 60 slightly up to 61,000. And look at the giant steep climb under Trump's tax plan, under his economy to try and help working class families, right? Median household income went from around 61 at the end of Obama all the way up to about 65, right? So you're talking about an increase of about $4,000 per working family. Trump's plan certainly helped working families, right? You're getting on average about $4,000 more per year with his policies. He really does help. So Biden says he's not going to raise your taxes if you make under $400,000 a year. However, okay, what he has said is that on day one, he will repeal the 2017 Trump tax cuts. Okay, so he's not saying he'll raise your taxes. He's just saying he'll repeal the tax cuts that Trump gave you. See, so he's not gonna make a new policy to raise your taxes. Instead, he's just gonna repeal the policy that actually gave you money back. Okay, so on day one, it literally says they will repeal the Trump tax cuts, meaning there's going to be a giant increase in taxes for middle-class families, right? If we look at that previous graph, under Trump, you got about, $4,000 more with all of his policies in place. And so I think it's a tricky kind of like wordplay. He's not going to raise taxes on the middle class. If you make less than $400,000, he's not going to make a new policy raising your taxes, but he will repeal the Trump tax cuts. You can look at the Washington Post story, or you can even listen to these guys on the news who are like, if they repeal it, it clearly is going to have a negative impact on working class families because these tax cuts from Trump actually helped them.
Senator Harris said that she wanted to repeal the Trump tax cuts on day one, do away entirely with the law. Now, obviously, the Trump tax cuts significantly lowered the tax rate for lower income earners. In fact, the Tax Policy Center found that middle income workers Some middle income workers saw $900 a year in tax savings. So repealing the Trump tax cuts, full on repeal, that does raise taxes on middle income earners.
So I love that they're admitting it now, that that the Trump tax cuts actually helped families. Okay, they wouldn't admit it then, but they will now, which is crazy to me. The one last thing that I want to show you is a graph. I'm a science teacher, so data is very exciting to me. So I apologize if it's not as super like woo to you. But one of the things that they have been saying over and over again is that under Trump, the middle class has been declining, right? So like the amount of families in the middle class is going down. And that's true, and that sounds scary, okay? But if you actually look at the data from Pew Research, so here I'll put the graph up to actually look at it, right? So this yellow kind of decreasing line shows that the middle class is going down from the it used to be 62% of our population was middle class, and that number is declining all the way down to 43% now. So see, ooh, scary. Under Trump, there's less middle class families. The middle class is declining, okay? Again, true, but if you look at the lower income line, which is this light green one at the bottom, right, that went from 10% of our population, and that also decreased down to 9%. There's actually less lower income families than there were before, which is a good thing. We would like that number to be zero, right? We'd like that number to be no families in the lower income kind of section. But instead, what you'll notice is this dark green line that goes up from 29% all the way up to 48%. That is the upper income bracket. The middle class family is declining, but that's because they're moving up into the upper income bracket. Okay, so people are making more money according to Pew Research. Families are being more prosperous. These are good things. We want this to continue. We want more people to be in the upper income bracket, not in the lower income. And it's a good thing that people are moving from middle income into upper income. That's a good thing. It just sounds scary, like middle class is declining. Oh, Trump is such a failure. So just keep that in mind, November 3rd, okay? I know that everything that the news says about wonderful Biden is that he is for the working class, that he's for lower income people, that he will help you. And I just don't see it. Instead, I see him repealing a tax cut that actually helped working class families. I see their policies as being detrimental to working class families, right? Like, look at the increase of median household income under Obama. It only increased about $1,000 per family for his 8 years in office. Trump has been in office only like 3.5, and he's already increased it over $4,000 for each family. Okay, that's huge. Why would we want to vote for someone who has this slow growth? We want to vote for someone who has this massive increase in more money for real families. Vote for Trump, man. Don't believe everything they say about him. He has good policies that are positively affecting families.